Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Revs Dev Talk. My name's Rev Luthor, and I'm here to take my experiences in education with video games to determine what the developers were trying to accomplish in the gameplay. Today, we'll be looking at a game most people have played, and a personal favorite of mine, Borderlands. At first glance, Borderlands looks like any other cookie-cutter shooter on the market today, and in some ways, it is. Although there are guns, grenades, and shooting, that is where the similarities between popular first-person shooters and Borderlands stop. Borderlands, a game often referred to as Diablo with guns, is an FPS RPG where your main goal is to collect loot, level up your character, and explore this planet called Pandora. No, not that Pandora. Rather a Pandora filled with bandits, corporations, and dangerous creatures that make even a grown man cry. In this desolate planet, you play as one of four characters, all with their special talents and preferred weapons, to search for a vault with rumored treasures of untold mystery and value. As you work your way through the game, you are confronted with many different characters, both good and bad, and they can be easily differentiated by one thing. Good guys have faces, and bad guys don't. The game introduces characters that are friendly, with a unique personality and a consistency to them that makes them memorable and stick with us even when we put the game down. For instance, at the beginning of the game, there's a voice and an image of a woman that manifests itself on the screen and guides you to new objectives and compliments you on jobs well done. Since she has a face, and a fairly attractive one at that, it makes it easier to like and eventually rely on her for advice and encouragement. In contrast, the enemies in the game are either creatures that are trying to kill you in some way, or bandits that have masks completely covering their faces. As human beings, when the face of another is covered by something, like a mask, it's very easy to see them as less than they really are. This is especially true when the person in question does something that no sane human would do. Professor Herbert C. Kellman, a researcher on dehumanization, shows us that there are two different types of identifying human characteristics. Uniquely human, or things that other species don't have, like civility and morality, and human nature, like vital agency and warmth. He also stated there are two different types of dehumanization methods, mechanistic and animalistic. Mechanistic refers to the cold, rigid, and lack of agency that makes people more like machines than humans. Animalistic people, however, are seen as amoral, unintelligent, and lacking of any moral sense. Now, assuming you have played the game, you know that most of the enemies in the game seem crazy and say things that, at least in my mind, make no sense. These crazy comments and a lack of a face make it much easier to see them as animals rather than a human being. Now imagine if all the enemies had faces, and even individual personalities. Moving past the fact of how much money and time that it would take in order to give everyone in the game that much character, it would make them much harder to kill. You would not see them as animals, but as individuals with wants, needs, and desires. I don't know about you, but if I knew I was killing people instead of an animal, it would make it much harder to progress throughout the game. In all media, there is a flow or pacing that occurs, having multiple high and low points that eventually lead you up to a great finish, and Borderlands is no different. In fact, the defined pacing that the game goes through is generally in this order: exploring, combat, and looting. A high when you get into combat and fight everything without losing your shield, or fighting an enemy that spits fire at you, followed by a low when you finish off the enemies and are able to loot and explore the area where you just dispatched all those enemies. Even opening chests have their highs and lows. Creating these highs and lows throughout the game keeps us interested without numbing us to constant high action, or not keeping our interest by just exploring everything. The time when that flow is lost or interrupted, and the game pauses and puts up a text stream telling you how to level up or use shields, breaks us out of that flow. Now I understand that there is certain information that the player needs to know in order to have the best chance to defeat all their enemies. However, if that pause comes up at the wrong time and interrupts the flow of game, like in the middle of combat, it can take us out of an otherwise enjoyable experience and make us lose immersion. And any good game without flow is an experience that isn't very immersive. Something that is also worth noting about this game, and is said to be the defining jewel and the crown that it wears, is the amount of loot. It is said that there are over 1 million individual guns in this game, and even if you play through it multiple times, you won't get the same loot twice. Loot can be, well, looted by many means, whether it be from lockers, piles of trash, toilets, piles of bones, trash cans, mailboxes, or even chests. It all can be done to your heart's content. Loot in the game also is all randomly generated, and you can potentially get an epic weapon that burns the target to a crisp, or nothing more than the ammo that you already have. This randomness of the drops makes you explore almost every nook and cranny to make sure that you get every little piece of loot that you can find. This randomness, as well as the potential of epic loot, conditions us to do things we normally would not do, and is referred to as a Skinner box. What is a Skinner box, you say? Well, without going into too much detail about psychology, it's a test developed by Burris Frederick Skinner to test operant conditioning. It separated rats and pigeons from all outside stimuli and given one or two simple choices that could be either rewarded or penalized. This made it much easier to reinforce certain behavior and discourage other behavior by means of reward and pain. So what does that have to do with Borderlands? Well, operant conditioning is just as easily taught to humans. Since the loot system in Borderlands is all random, and there is potential of epic loot in all lootable items, players are conditioned to want to explore and find every chest and storage unit that contains loot. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing, as used in Borderlands to reward people for exploring the world, but it can get out of hand if used in place of content or extend out playtime, when none really exist. Overall, this game is a great example of a mashup of two genres not normally put together, joined almost seamlessly in an enjoyable experience which all should play. Although it does suffer from glitches and a lack of a compelling story, it more than makes up for it in replayability as well as an innovative game that pushes the boundaries of FPSs. I would definitely recommend this and give it a 9 out of 10. Thanks for listening to Revs Dev Talk, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any suggestions about more games that I should review, just leave it in the comments. And remember, play smarter, not harder.